infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
On this episode of Into the Fray, I welcome Stephanie on with me. Now, Stephanie, you say you've had a lifetime of encounters, that they continue to happen to this day, and that they are simply just a part of who you are, right?
That's right. That's right, Shannon. I kind of call it the doorways that spirits come in and out of. A lot of times I try to keep those doorways closed, but some sneak in every once in a while. And then I get more imagery from people that have passed than I do see people that have passed.
So this imagery, it's more like a flash, like a picture in your mind that gives you kind of this painting of what might have happened? Or is this an ongoing set of things in your mind that you can see?
It's usually when I'm around someone, sometimes people are just attached to other people. Like, for instance, if someone's grandmother had passed and that person was really close, or that grandmother just wants to be attached to that person, I can tell them about their grandmother, and it's not something I just offer up or anything, but it's something I've always been able to do. And I've even helped folks missing people. And in some of those cases, I've experienced some of those experiences, helping them understand like what happened to them and even where they are.
So obviously you're sensitive. So at what point, and basically this is exactly like what a remote viewer would do. That's fascinating to me because I love anything true crime as well. So you have actually helped in missing people cases.
I have not worked with law enforcement, but I have worked personally with folks that really just want to know if their loved one was alive.
Wow. Oh, wow. That must be tough.
And it is tough. And it's not something that, again, I don't do this for like strangers or anything like that. I just do it like maybe a friend of a friend or something like that has someone that has gone missing. What happens a lot of times is I'll either feel their experience then and see those flashes and images of what's happened, or sometimes I will dream, because if I don't get the flashes immediately, I'll tell folks, okay, let me sleep on it. Literally, let me sleep on it, because a lot of times folks will come to me in a dream and they will give me that imagery in that dream. And then I'll know like, okay, this is what's happened. And it's, it's different, but it's just something I've always been able to do. I've always felt like everyone could do this, it's not just me. I just think that, everyone has the ability, in other words.
And I understand this is me taking it to DEFCON 5, but have you ever been in the presence of someone that you got a flash of what they did and it was the darkest thing you could do, molesting a child or killing another person, something like that?
Unfortunately, I have. And I try to get as far away from those folks as possible, and if need be, be active about it or whatever. But yeah, it's unfortunate that again, I try to keep those doors closed unless I actively open them, for folks that need me to. But I try to keep those doors closed, because seeing those things and experiencing those things all the time is really tough. because, I have work to do like everyone else. I work and have a family life and everything. So I can't really go around all the time, sensing folks that have passed and listening to all of their stories. But, if I've had some folks actually push through that really needed to, but yeah, that's kind of how it works. I just keep the doors closed until I have to open them for folks.
So with the doors being closed, that's a good analogy. And if you're per se, you're at a party and, maybe you just haven't put the doors up, you haven't shut them for the party for whatever reason. And say one of these really, really dark people is there and you have that mental image. Does that physically affect you or drain you? And then you're like, oh man, I need to shut that door and keep that shut. Like, how does that work?
Absolutely. That's exactly what happens. I would just really immediately almost shut down mentally and just physically and just go, okay, that's it. I got to leave this party. And I've actually told people that I was at friends that I went to a party with or somewhere with and said, that person's not a good person. We're going to need to get away from this, and the people that know me that go places with me like that, they know that I can do those things because a lot of them are folks that I've actually talked to about their lost loved ones. There's someone attached to them, like I was saying. So yeah, I just leave those situations because I really don't want to see any more than what has pushed through a lot of times,
And I'm not trying to jump ahead on your bullet point list. Thank you for sending that along, by the way.
Yeah.
But, and I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to jump ahead to where you tell the whole story, but this is just kind of setting up the things that you can see. Can you see kind of these non-human / demonic, whatever label we want to put on them, entities, much like Pam in the FRAY experiences could see, like she'll go to Walmart and see to what extent someone has been, quote unquote, kind of oppressed or taken over by a dark entity that was literally stuck on people's backs. Like she could see that. Can you see things like that?
No, I really, by the way, I love Pam, wherever you are, Pam. Hello. Really enjoyed the shows with Pam. But actually, no, I can't see anything like that. And because I've listened to her shows, I'm kind of familiar with what she's described. And I can't see anything like that. I can actually see what someone's done. I can see, and there actually is something on the timeline that'll kind of go into that a little deeper, but I cannot see those things. I get the imagery that is projected from whoever the victim was, or usually from the bad person's mind. I'll get the images of what they've done.
I would say that's a good thing that you can't see things the way that the Pam did, because there was a lot of stuff that affected her negatively, which who could blame her for feeling that way?
Absolutely.
All right, so and before we go on, I just want to say one last thing. Hearing you speak about the fact that you can get these images and feelings and things from not only the perpetrator, like we're talking about crimes now, but the victims as well. It's really a bummer that more agencies wouldn't be more open to this kind of work or having this kind of assistance. And I realize that some do, of course. The government has used and does use remote viewers, I think, to this day. But I just think every local agency should have someone like you on board to at the very least, gather some leads.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. And it would be something that I would be open to. Again, it's something I've done my entire life. So I would be very open to doing something like that for anyone, that needed me to.
But that said, it would take a toll on you.
It would, but at the same time, if it would help find someone or help someone, that would be the end goal, which is good. But yeah, it does take a toll on me when things are like that. But I think if the end game is that someone is found safe or someone is just found and you can help families, then why not, you know?
I always think of that movie with Ben Kingsley where he's the psychic / remote viewer, whatever you want to label. And that was the dark one. That's kind of where my brain goes. And I'm like, that would be a heck of a lot to go through for the person executing these movements through these dark people's minds or the victims' minds. Either way, it would take its toll. So, all right.
Yeah.
So first up, you say you've always known when spirits are around. Do you have what's your earliest memory of this kind of a thing?
Ever since I was a child and I've had memories. I grew up with my grandmother and my mother, and we lived in these apartments that was mostly for like single moms and like senior citizens. So it created this environment where, especially with the senior citizens, like a lot of times someone would be attached to them, like maybe a husband had passed or a wife had passed. So I would, as a kid, I had access to like all of these people that were in this apartment complex, and I could see like the people that were attached to them. And I thought everyone could. And I kind of like to relate it to like I'm very blind, like I have to wear glasses. And I started wearing glasses when I was like in the 3rd grade. But before that, I actually thought people actually had the same vision I did until I got the glasses. So it's the same thing with this.
So you probably, since it was just always this thing that you could do, you didn't realize you were different. Did you think everybody could see what you could see?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then I remember speaking about it a little bit with my grandmother and my mother, who also have some of those abilities, and them like, oh, don't talk about that, that's hush hush and stuff like that. And I couldn't understand why they would want to do that, because that all of those things were so prevalent, and come to find out they were for all of us. But that those older generations, those are things that a lot of those folks don't want to talk about, which is understandable. I get that.
I find it ironic that you had poor physical eyesight, but you had this other sight that was very, very in tune, very keen. 20/20.
I do too. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is because I've noticed before with some of the folks that have been on, they've made these correlations with things. And my hope was I would do this same thing. And already before we started the podcast, like when I was doing the timeline and everything, I started figuring some things out. And I was like, this is great. I should have written this down a long time ago.
Yeah, it's funny how going through things like that, you're just kind of going, wait a second, this makes sense now. There's like this light bulb that goes off. I've had many of those moments myself. So yeah. All right. So grandma and mom, obviously it's running through family lines. Do you remember a time when you had a discussion with, one or both of them and said, hey, I can see these things. And then it was always just this open environment where you guys were discussing all of that?
So until I got older, my grandmother passed like when I was in my 20s. And again, she really would not talk about it. She never would disagree with me, and she would never, let's just put it this way. She knew, she knew, and she really wouldn't talk about her experiences as much. I would hear stories about them, of course, but she really didn't talk about those. And my mom really tried not to talk about those. But as I've gotten older and gotten to be an adult, I'll tell mom like, oh yeah, by the way, like I had a cousin that passed, and I was like, so my cousin came through and this is what she said. Will you send this message to my aunt? And my mom's like, yeah, so she totally knows that, I'm capable of this. And she knew a long time ago, but as a child, she really didn't want to talk to me about it. And I think that was just to discourage me just talking to the general public about what we could do or what I could do. And, things are so much more out there now, which is great. But back then, in school and things like that, I'm sure she was afraid that I would be bullied, which I was anyway, because I was like such a nerd. And still am. But, I can see why as a parent she would try to protect me and not talk about it. But now as adults, we talk about it all the time.
Hey, high five to a fellow nerd. That's me too. So
That's right.
Don't even worry about it. So after your grandma passed, did she come to you? Did she visit you?
She did. And it was so wonderful because she came to me in a dream, which is how some folks will do it. And she was sitting in her apartment on her sofa where she always sat in the same place. And when I walked in the door with my mom of her apartment, she was like, "There's my girls. I love you too. You know that, right?" And I was like, "I do." And then I woke up and I was like, "Oh my gosh, she visited me, And then when she was passing, I was in the hospital with her. And I was praying to myself, please don't take her, because she was such an integral part of my life. And without me saying that out loud, she lifted her hands and was like, "Let me go, Stephanie, let me go." So all three of us ladies have always had a really close connection in life and in death.
All right. So now we'll get into a little bit of the things that you actually have seen physically with your eyes, not just with your mind's eye. And the first thing on the list is the ghost on the stairs.
Yes. And the reason why it's the first on the list is because the first friend that I shared this ability with she was really put off by it, but she was my college friend, and I felt like at the time I could share with her. And she had invited me to a cookout, another friend of hers that I'd never met before. And I show up at the cookout, and, we're hanging around outside and stuff. And she's just like, "Hey, come on in, come see Tim's house," and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, "No, I'm good." And she finally coaxed me into the house, and I go in the house, and sure enough, as soon as I go through the kitchen, I pass by the stairs, there's a shadow, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, there they are," because I already knew something was in the house and there was something there, but I didn't say anything to her at the time. And then a couple of weeks later after that, we were talking, and I could tell she was mad at me for some reason. And I was like, "Missy, what's going on?" She was like, "Well, I really didn't like the way that you acted at Tim's house, where you didn't want to come in, and he was wondering why you were like that or whatever." And I said, "Well, you remember I've told you that I can see things." I was like, "There's something in his house." And she just got white as a sheet and was like, "I've never told you about that before." And I was like, "You don't have to, because there's something in his house." And she was like, "Yeah, he can't keep a housekeeper because of it."
Oh, wow.
And I was like, "Yeah, I know." I mean, but because when I had first shared it with her and she was just didn't believe it, I just didn't talk to her anymore about it. But I knew something was in there, and sure enough, it was. And yeah, she was a believer then.
Did she give you any more detail about the goings on with this shadow being, entity, person, whatever?
She had just mentioned that he had lived with it for a long time. It was something that kind of came with the house, but that he went through housekeeper after housekeeper because this thing would move things and make noise and whisper and do things like that. And I never could get a good feel of exactly what it was or who it was, even if that's how you want to say it. But I never did investigate it myself. But she just said that he couldn't keep anyone there. Yeah.
Do you feel like if you had gone back in there and tried to make contact with this thing that you could have?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Did she ask you to do that at all?
No, she didn't. And I actually elaborated on something that I had gotten a little bit. I had gotten a little bit of feedback, if you will, from the entity, but she totally didn't want to talk about it. I think she was just shocked that she had met somebody who had that ability, even though I'd already told her that I did. She was just shocked about it. So I didn't go into much more detail, and neither did she.
I mean, I guess I can't blame her in a way, right? It's a lot easier for most people just to be like, okay, that was weird. Bye. Talk to you about something normal next time we talk. This didn't happen. So what did this thing look like?
It was like a shadow figure. And, there's like shadow people that are, just obviously faceless. And I don't know, I've heard that you had an experience with that, but this was just like a shadow figure or person, shadow person, if you want to say it that way. But it was just dark. And, and when you see a shadow person, it's like they're darker than dark. I mean, it's hard to describe unless you see it, but it's blacker than night. It's blacker than the darkness that there was no lights on in the staircase. And so, everything's pitch black, but I could still see the shadow. And it wanted me to see it. I mean, it was there. But I was like, man, like
yeah, it's nearly impossible to impart how dark they are. It just doesn't cover it. It just can't. But this thing was a negative entity. That's what you got from it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely.
Love to know what the poor housekeepers went through. I mean, if they're just like, we are out of here.
I know. And I think because it showed itself immediately, it wanted to be known, so to speak. It wanted to show itself. It wanted people to know that it was there, especially for folks that are sensitive. I mean, entities know when you walk in the room, if you're sensitive to them or not, then they'll make an effort.
Well, once you saw it, did it dematerialize, or did you walk away from it?
I just walked past it and was like, oh, there you are.
Like knew you were here.
I see you, Yep. And I really, after that, I was so uncomfortable. And I know that my friend was like feeling that energy from me, where I was just like, oh my God, I want to get out of this house, because I really wasn't planning on, I was like going to go to a cookout and have fun. I wasn't planning on like something like that, just showing up like that. But it happens sometimes.
And not to take this back to, I'm always doing the movie comparison, and I'm not saying it's like a movie. It just reminds me of the scene from The Conjuring when she walks in and she can see, who's affected and where they're standing, and, that immediately she knows it's negative. I find that fascinating, those of you guys that can do that. And I also think, I mean, what a toll that could take if you don't know how to shut the door, or maybe, you leave it cracked one day, like I'm sure you've done, and then something seeps in, and that must stick with you at some point, depending on what you experience.
It does. It really does. And and it does take a toll, but it's one of those things, the funny thing is for me is, and again, writing all this stuff down on a timeline really helped me become even more aware of it. But is that some of this stuff happens to me just so often that I just I don't think that much about it. You know what I mean? And then maybe later on I'll be like, man, that's why I feel so drained, because that happened or this happened or whatever. But yeah, I mean, things just happen a lot, and I just have found ways to deal with it, especially as I've gotten older. I've gotten more powerful in a way that I'm more sensitive, but then I'm also able to say, nope, when I need to, most of the time anyway. There's been a few instances where I haven't been able to, but a lot of that was when I was younger, where things just came anyway, whether I wanted it to or not.
Does Tim still live in that house? Do you know?
You know what? I don't know, but I know where the house is because I'm a realtor and I drive everywhere. And I actually have driven by that house a few times, you know, working. And I'm like, "Oh, I wonder if he's still in that house, because I've lost touch with Missy, who was like my friend from college. But I do still like wonder, like, is he there? Is he still living with that? I hope he's gotten some help if he doesn't want to live with that.
Now, you labeled it a ghost in the bullet point list, but do you feel that was a person at some point?
I do, actually. And that's why I kind of hesitate to call it a shadow person, because I actually feel like shadow people are a little different. And I have something like that on my timeline, and I'll go into it a little bit more in detail. But I really do feel like that shadow people are a little bit different than like a ghost of someone. This just presented like a shadow in the stairs.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I wonder how much, because I would assume that who they can show themselves to and where they show themselves and how much they can, if they move things or like a poltergeist or something, which can also have a blanket statement that probably shouldn't when you really look at it. But I just wonder, is it the more evil that you were in life, and that anger and that hate just seethes over into, your afterlife, and you have a lot more power in the afterlife to do whatever the hell you want to do? Or because you're a non-human entity, you automatically get a pass also. I just wonder how that works, if it's levels of, I don't know, energy or power, however to label that.
Yeah. And, I've questioned those things as well, because really none of us know, do we? And I mean, because we really don't. I mean, I know what I see and what I've experienced, but I don't know why or how sometimes things are coming across, but they do. And I have kind of a theory about some of it. Some of it I feel like is interdimensional almost, in a way. There comes my nerdy part or nerdy side of myself, because I do feel like there's doorways and there's things like that we're just not aware of, but maybe those things are. I don't know.
All right. So next up we have moms calling out.
Yes. So this is just to kind of give you reference to like how connected my mom and, like I said, my grandma are. So I was leaving work and I heard my mom like call my name, like really loud. And I actually thought that she was there in the parking lot, because I was walking towards my car when I heard her. And she was like, "Stephanie," like, but it was like this, she didn't say it that way, but it was just like, she just said my name. And I turn around, I look, and she's nowhere. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, where did that come from? And I was like, what's going on? And so I called her, just to see like, what was that? Is she here? That kind of thing. And I don't know. I could not figure out why she had called out to me. And then she wasn't there when I'm looking for her. Like, I figured she maybe had parked her car, rolled the window down, and was yelling or something. But what had happened was, right there at that particular time, she had experienced a very violent experience. And I didn't realize that until her and I finally got in touch that had happened. But I said, well, you called out to me. And she was like, yeah, while it was happening, I was calling out to you.
Oh,
yeah. But she said, I was literally like calling out to you for help. I wish, of course, at the time I knew that that's what it was, but I just really couldn't. I was so like, I was just getting off work, and I was just like, where is she? Like, where the hell, and then I call her and she didn't answer. And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I just misheard it. You know what I mean? You try to like talk yourself like out of like what's happened sometimes, because sometimes you're just like, oh, whatever, and I should know better, right?
Well, no, and you don't want to assume that something horrible is happening all the time, right? But I'm sorry about that. I'm not going to pry at all into what it was, but that's horrifying to hear.
It is. It's also something that, like, if it were to happen again, I would know now. But,
Right.
that was the first time that had ever happened where I had actually heard her voice out loud calling out to me.
If you were standing there with your grandma, like say your grandma was still around at that time and she was walking in the car with you, do you think she would have heard the same thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, because there would be times when, even though my grandmother didn't really like to talk about things, she would say, well, I know you were thinking this, or you were doing this, or whatever. And, like any parent, like, usually knows what their child's doing, but it was a little deeper than that. She would just be like, oh, I know you were thinking about that, or I knew that you were doing this. I mean, she would just know things like ahead of time. Like, I remember one time I like spent the night with a friend of mine, and she actually lived in an apartment like down below, and I ended up coming like back home because I didn't want to spend the night with her. And my grandmother was like, oh, I knew you were coming back. She's like, right on the dot. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Just things like that. So yeah, she would have definitely heard my mom.
Probably means that you couldn't get away with SHIT, right? Like you had to mind your P's and Q's because everybody knew what the heck was going on all the time.
All the time. It was, yeah. I was a really good kid.
Yeah, I'll bet. Didn't have a choice.
I did not have a choice.
Like the second you thought about doing something wrong, you're either there'd be a knock on the door. Like,
I would think something. Sometimes I'd be like, man, if I could go do that, my mom would be like, you better not do that.
Wow, really?
Like, oh my God. Like,
good Lord. Yeah.
And it wasn't always like that, but a lot of times it was.
Man. If we could teach that, that would be a powerful tool that parents could use. Forget location on the cell phone now. That's all we have is kids' location.
You don't need a tracker.
Yeah.
You just need a psychic.
You poor thing. You couldn't even ditch school like everybody did back in the day. The second you had the thought, mom would be like, I don't think so. Get your butt back through those doors.
Yeah. That was basically my whole childhood. Yes.
Oh, man. All right. Well, next up, we're going to talk about an interesting thrift store find.
Yeah. So my mom, even though she has some of the same skills I do, I don't think she's honed it in the same way I have. Whereas I have, over the years, I've really worked to try to figure some of this out for myself, because I'm so curious about it. And it's something that my mom tries really hard not to hone as a skill. I don't think she looks at it as a skill, because I feel like I would have felt something attached to what she brought home, but she didn't at the time. So she is a thrifter, and she's the kind of thrifter that, like, if you were like at a yard sale and you're like, I want $1 for that, my mom would be like, nah, you just want $0.25 for that, don't you? And like, and it's, I swear you'd be like, yeah, I just want $0.25 for that. Like, so her persuasive skills are awesome, but she comes home with like this dragon like puppet. And when I say puppet, it was one of those that was on strings, and she hangs it in the corner of my nephew's bedroom, and she's proud of her find and everything. She even showed it to me, and I didn't feel anything at the time attached to it. It was just a quick random, like, oh yeah, I got that at the thrift store. I mean, she basically says that in almost every sentence now that when I talk to her, I got it at the thrift store. But anyway, so she showed it to me. And then soon after that, she called and she was like, something's in the house. And I was like, what is in the house? And she was like, I don't know, but it's moving things. It's running through the house. And then right there at that moment, the phone like starts to static. And I'm like, oh, something is in the house. And she was like, yeah. And so I actually went down there and was like, let's see what's in the house. And because this went on for like days before she called me. And I was like, well, you should have called me like as soon as it started, you know. But I think she was trying to ignore it because she was afraid of it, you know, rightfully so. But the thing about it running through the house is I could actually follow it. So when I got down there, I could see its footprints like running across the bed, like little indentions. And it was small, like little feet. So it was running across her bed, and I followed it into the closet in my nephew's bedroom and proceeded to ask it not kindly to leave.
Now, these footprints, these are like little mini human footprints?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Well, they're indentions. I mean, I couldn't see the actual footprint, but like you could see the indentions. And she had told me, she was like, it's running up and down the bed, you know, and shutting things and moving things. And then again, we're talking about it on the phone and the static comes across and we can't hear each other talk. And she has to call me back and it happens again. So something was definitely, you know, there, running around from her thrift store find. But I asked it, like I said, not too kindly to leave. And the next day, my mom and her best friend and I all got together and saged that house from top to bottom, and we got rid of it.
Now, when you got rid of it, what does that mean? Well, what I should say is, it's a two-parter, I guess. How, you know, what you were going to answer, yes, plus what did she do with that creepy ass, you know, stringed puppet that no one should buy in the first place anyway, because they're damn creepy.
It was creepy, really, you know, but I didn't say anything to Mom because she was so proud of it. And I was just like, okay, whatever, you know, got it from the store. But I feel like I would have felt it, like if I would have touched it or something like that beforehand, and I probably wouldn't have brought it home. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it was just one of those things where she was like, all the things I bring home from the thrift store, and then this thing has something attached to it, you know? And I'm like, I know, but yeah, we worked hard and we got rid of that thing. And I really say thing because even though it presented as a child, I don't know that that's what it was.
So did you have feelings towards that in particular, that it was not a child, or just because of the level of activity that was going on? And again, what I mentioned earlier, like the energy behind it seemed so powerful.
Yeah, it was a negative energy for sure. And I think that it took on the childlike image of, because I could see the image of it, you know, as soon as I walked into her house, you know, of course I could see it.
What did that look like then?
It was like a small child. I mean, it presented that way with no eyes. Like, so it was black, but it was just a small little child without any eyes. I mean, it had a face, but it didn't have like the eyes. And it was like a trickster, like, you know, the things it was doing was very impish, like, I would say. So I just don't know what it was. You know, some people may want to say, well, you know, it could have been a demonic presence, because I've heard that before when you talk about children and things like that being a possibility. But I really don't say that. I just say, well, I know it was a negative energy. It presented as a child. So I just don't really know like what it was.
That is interesting, though, because, you know, you say the D word, the demon word, and we have heard that, right? Like John Paul has talked about that when they come through or they show themselves to whoever it may be, whether it's to someone sensitive or just full on like, here I am, they just can't quite get it right. So the fact that, you know, as far as get it right is like to fully form as a child to make you think, oh, no, it's just a cute little spirit of a child. Well, no, it's got negative aspects to it that I can feel. Plus, it has no freaking eyes, which might be a good indication of Not a whole human, 100% sweet little innocent entity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you just can't tell what it is. Again, you can make all the guesses you want to, but how do we know? How do we know for sure? I can say that it did feel more, it was almost like it was impish in a childlike way where, the things it would do, because I saw like the little indentions on the bed where it would just run around and move stuff and shut stuff and, as if it were funny. But I did feel like there was a negativity attached to that too. Like, you're not going to catch me, you're not going to get me or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I will. I'll take care of you. But it was that, but the image was that one it was of a child, but it just didn't have any eyes. It didn't have the correct facial features it should have, which made me think, well, maybe it's something else. I don't know.
That's so much nope. Ugh.
It is.
It's just, nah.
I mean, I can laugh about these things now, but it's terrifying. You're just like, what is this? Like, what in the hell did you bring home, Mom?
Like, Mom, enough with the dang thrift store puppets, especially. I can just imagine what that thing looked like too. And it's not the poor dragon's fault, it just happened to be the vessel, but still. I wonder though, because, talking about how whatever it was, it just wasn't formed 100% like a normal child to those that could see it. Is that laziness on its part? Is that ego? I'm not trying to attach human feelings to this thing. I'm just saying, is that, but their lack of a better term, is that ego? Is that its ego going, oh, well, I can stay here as long as I freaking want. You can't get rid of me, or, did it just not care that knowing, and two-parter, and don't they realize that some of us can see it? And might care that there's this creepy ass little whatever the heck it is running around with no eyes and deformed face and kind of doing this trickster little things around your mom's house. Like, I just wonder, do they think about that ahead of time, or do they just not care?
I don't know, but it certainly had that feeling of like, I'm here, I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to do things to scare the crap out of you, and it did. But I was like, oh, no, that that's not going to work. But yeah, you do wonder, like, does it have an ego? Does it have those things that we attach to, like a person? Like, does it have that? And it did feel like it. I mean, it knew what it was doing, and it was having fun doing it. But again, I did feel a negative energy from it. So I knew that it didn't have the best intentions.
Yeah, no matter what it looked like, right? You're like, right. You're not fooling me. Get the hell out of here. So after you guys handled business, it was totally like gone, done, no more activity?
No more activity.
Nice.
No, it was done. Yeah.
Take that.
Yeah, I can help folks with that too.
Wow. Now
especially now.
Can you do that remotely, like over the phone?
No, I don't think so. I've never tried though, now that you've asked, but I don't know if I could or not. That's a great question, Shannon.
Somebody get in touch. Let's try it out. You already know I don't have anything to test you out on, so not that I want it in my house, because what you just described is such a bag of nope. I can't even. Your poor mom was probably like, well, at least I have someone I could call though, because Stephanie's gonna come over and kick some ass on this thing right now.
Yeah, she just wasn't paying attention. I do feel that if she was paying attention, and if again she had honed her skills in that direction, then I think she would have known, but it was too late when she brought it home.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, but after that, did your mom go, oh, well, maybe I should listen to myself more and use some of those skills that I have?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She was like, oh, I can't believe I did that. And I'm like, I can't either. Like, but oh well, it happens. It happens to the best of us. I mean, even folks that can see or feel some of that stuff, some of that gets by.
Right.
You wonder, like, was it not showing itself as much as possible for my mom to pick it up and bring it home because it wanted to come home to somewhere? Like, you're like, is it thinking that? Does it know that she's sensitive and so it's not showing itself at the
Right.
time?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the hundreds, I should say, of questions that come up when we're talking about scenarios like that. So if you had gone on that shopping trip with her and you got just like this quick, like, because to me, like, I immediately, when you said puppet on strings, it just something about those things just creep me out, just automatically. Like, some people hate clowns, don't mind that, but if you put the clown on on strings, I guess it would probably be, I don't know, puppets are creepy. Anyway, if you laid hands on that during the shopping trip, say you were with her, you could have told these things ahead of time a little bit to know that there was something there, and hey, let's go to the next item here, Mom, not this one.
I hope I could have, again, if it was hiding from her.
Yeah.
Could have possibly hid from me, but there's been incidents where I've been with my mom and not necessarily like thrifting, but just, around someone, whatever, and just be like, nah, we probably should move on, and she listens. I mean, and vice versa.
All right. Well, next up is the electricity effect.
Yeah, the electricity effect is just something that I noticed with my mom and I, especially like through phones. And yes, that one thing, and that's why I put this after the thrift store find, because I noticed that there was this electrical, like static sound coming through the phone. And I'm like, what is that? Well, her and I can still get on the phone even before she had anything in her house and after the fact, but things will cut out or she'll burn through a phone. But a lot of times what'll happen, I'll notice, is I'll walk under lights. Like my porch light, for instance, I've got one that blinks on and off every time I walk underneath it. And I'm like, okay, like, it's just one of those things that seems like there's some type of an electrical charge that's associated with some of my sensitivity.
And watches as well. Can you wear watches?
I cannot wear a watch. And I do not wear a watch for that reason.
I think it was it Craig Crawford I was talking to about this, the whole slider situation, like under street lights and all that. And I said, he goes, oh yeah, I can't wear a regular watch. And I said, well, what about an Apple Watch? Have you tried to have it like one of these more, computerized watches? And is it the same thing?
I have never tried to even have a computerized watch, if that tells you anything. Because I really have never been able to wear one.
Wow.
And I've never even like, oh yeah, I should get that, or I should try that. Maybe I should now, though, that you've mentioned it. That's a great idea.
Well, it's the same thing I remember saying to him. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's an expensive test, because the Apple Watch is not cheap.
It does. You get no Apple support, so it's not like
you can't call and go, hey, I'm a slider. Can I return this?
I don't know what to do, but yeah, it's not working. There's no instructions that come with anything from Apple anyway. So, I'll just be stuck. Yeah.
All they're going to say is hard
I'll call
reset.
Tell you, Shannon. I'll be like, Shannon, okay, I need to be reimbursed here. I bought this watch. I've tried it out.
This was your idea. And I knew I didn't have one all this time for a reason. No, that's really interesting. Yeah, because is that things around you, or is that coming from inside of you? I don't know.
I don't either. Like, for instance, and this happened recently, I was speaking to my husband. It was nighttime, and so we had a lot of lights on in the house, but I was speaking to my husband about my grandmother and just some memory I had of her, just reminiscing a little bit. And sure enough, the lights started flashing, and I'm like, okay, there she is. And my husband was like, that's what it is, because he had never experienced that happen before, simultaneously while I was talking about her, but I was like, oh yeah, it happens all the time, especially with my mom and I.
Did you feel a little bit like you should raise your hands and like, I am the all powerful, do not mess with me, my dear husband?
Right. I was just like, I actually just felt like really warm inside because I felt like my grandmother had, she'd just been there with me, right there at that moment. But yeah, I should try that too. I'll scare the crap out of him.
Like,
That's a great idea.
I'm just saying, mind your P's and Q's.
That's right.
No, but I know, and I'm not trying to make light of, you're like, this is a nice story and you're, making a joke. But no, that is so amazing though, that at that time, I mean, what else is that? That's wonderful. Like after all that time, your grandma was like, yeah, I'm still around. I'm still watching over you. I'm still here.
And she is, she really is. Yeah, she's helped me through a lot of things, even though she may not be in this plane. She is somewhere, or part of her is somewhere. So yeah, she definitely works through me and is with me a lot.
All right. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about sleep paralysis.
The reason why I had mentioned this on the timeline, Shannon, is because I do have sleep paralysis. I don't have it very often, but when I do, and I know scientifically people say one thing or another, like, oh, well, you're still asleep, but you just can't move your body. Things aren't linked, things aren't connected. But I've had experiences where I know I'm awake. I can't move, but I'm awake. And it's very frightening, by the way. I mean, it's one of those things that I wouldn't wish on anyone because you feel so vulnerable when that's happening. But the reason why I am awake and I know it is because I can feel certain things. For instance, like if I leave the light on in my bedroom, then it's on while I'm awake. Do you see what I'm saying? So if I was still asleep, would the light be on?
Right.
It's just things like that. And then I can see like the cat walk around and I'm like, well, I'm awake. There's the cat. It's walking by, I just can't move. So the thing is I almost think it's connected somehow. And I'm not sure why, because I had an experience when I was having some sleep paralysis that it's pretty unusual. I think I've got that on the timeline, but I don't know, for whatever reason, I've got that like as a different part of the story. But I'll go ahead, since we're right there, and tell you a little bit more about it. I had an instance where I was in a house and I was visited by what was in the house, and it was during sleep paralysis. And it almost made me feel like that entity had caused it. Because it came in like behind me while I was sleeping. So I was sleeping on my side and it just slipped in behind me. And it knew that I couldn't turn over to see what it was.
And it climbed into bed with you, or was it just standing behind?
No, I could feel it up against me. Like it climbed in bed and it just got right up against me.
Ugh.
Yeah, it was crazy. but my point is that I actually do feel like that some of those things that I experience can take advantage sometimes of that. Like it's connected in some way. Does that make sense? I mean, it doesn't, but I just feel like there's some type of connection with like what I can do, and then with the sleep paralysis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things will happen. Things will happen when I have sleep paralysis with certain entities, rather than not. So it's not like I have sleep paralysis and everything's just peachy keen. I'll have sleep paralysis and something's going to happen with an entity.
So I'm assuming that's the entity behind me story, right?
Yeah,
so it climbs into bed with you and gets right up against you. What ends up happening? What do you do? Can you break out of that?
I've never been able to break out of out of that. I've gone back to sleep. Usually what happens is I'll go to sleep, and somewhere in that, when it happens, but I will feel myself try to get out, like escape from it, and I can't. And so I'll just finally like actually go to sleep, and then I'll wake up and I'll remember every detail about it, because it's like, yeah, that wasn't a dream, that was real, that happened, because I can do like lucid dreaming, which is, if you're dreaming something and you're like, man, this isn't turning out too good, I can actually stop it, like in my dream, and go, wait a minute, this is getting a little bit too much, I don't want to dream this right now. So I can do that. I've trained myself over the years to do lucid dreaming. So with the sleep paralysis, though, I can't control it, which kind of, again, leads me to believe that, like, wow, like this is something that's connected to these entities.
And that's different from the one before that, the black shadow. What was that instance?
So the black shadow was while I was in sleep paralysis, and I was awake, so to speak, but my body wasn't. And the black shadow was in the corner. So I could see something in the corner. And I thought it was like a shadow person. And then it bent down and put its face right in mine. And it was a shadow person. And I was like, oh my God, and I remember being so frightened and my heart beating really fast. I could feel it, but I couldn't wake myself up. And then when I went to sleep, after that happened, I dreamed immediately that I had walked in the bathroom, and while I was looking in the mirror, the black shadow comes up behind me and grabs me and pulls me into the wall, and I disappear. So it was like, there's this entity, there's a black shadow, and it's there while I'm having the sleep paralysis. And then I go into a dream and it's there again. Do you see what I'm saying? There's like it's like two different encounters, so to speak. I don't know. I mean, it was really crazy, but when that happened with the shadow person or shadow figure, I felt like after all that happened, it was manifested by some things that were going on with my ex at the time, because he had worked this same job for a long time, and they were shutting down, and so he lost his job, and he got really depressed about it. And I felt like the depression was like so overwhelming and such a vacuum in the house that manifested that shadow person. That makes sense there. But that's just what I felt. I just felt like that was a manifestation of like his depression, because I remember he was so depressed for like months that I became like depressed. And so it was just like bleeding off from him and onto me. And then I just feel like it manifested that shadow person.
Though that's probably just the best analogy of depression, though. Like if you could make a depression into a physical form, I would imagine that's exactly what it would look like and act like.
Me too. And so was it? I don't know, but it really did feel that way, because it was so overwhelming to see something out of the corner of my eye while I'm having sleep paralysis. And it's this dark, what looks like maybe a dark figure. And then when it came into my eyesight, because you can't like move your head or anything when you're in the paralysis, it bent down and just hovered its head right over mine. So like, yeah, I'm over here, And then when I went to sleep after the sleep paralysis episode, it came in full force and just grabbed a hold of me. And like you said, I mean, it does certainly seem to be a good definition of what depression can do to people.
When you were in that dream section of this whole thing and it pulled you through the wall, do you recall what that quote unquote that space, I'm not calling it space, but what that area looked like on the other side of the wall? Like, where were you?
No, I don't know.
It's probably a good thing I don't recall.
Well, what happened was I just walked into the bathroom and I was just like looking in the mirror at myself, and then it came out of the wall and grabbed me And of course I was terrified, and then it just pulled me into the wall and I was gone. It was like I just disappeared. And it was crazy. It was just like, what? Like, and that's why I think that the paralysis is connected somehow, because I've had those experiences, you know.
The fact that you were looking into a mirror when all that happened is of slight interest to me, because I've always been fascinated with something like going into a psychomantium, right? Like the dark little tiny room with the one big mirror that you're supposed to just stare into. And not that I'm saying just like going to get an Apple Watch is probably not a good idea for you, really. This is probably not also a very good idea for someone like you that's that sensitive. And you're also already such a beacon to these things. I don't know that, to say, hey, Stephanie, go build a psychomantium and just see what kind of crazy, what goes down. I don't think it's a good idea. But, that whole mirror part of that dream is a little interesting.
Yeah, it is. And this is what I was talking about, like how when I wrote the timeline and I was thinking, well, maybe this will help, because I can make some connections. And this is what I'm talking about. Like the fact that you're mentioning the mirror, I'd never thought about that before, like really being a big part of it. But it really is, if you think about it,
Yeah, people have reported some very odd things when they're doing something like a psychomantium, and you hear the mirror thing come up in a lot of dream situations.
You do. And I find that very interesting. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because now I'm going to really think about that.
As long as you don't go in tonight and try the whole blood, like we did when we were kids, the whole Bloody Mary thing.
I'm not going to try that, yeah, Shannon.
No. You got enough going on, I would hazard to say. We've all tried it, at least those of us that don't have experiences and we're stupid enough to go, I want that to happen in my own house. No, you don't. Damn it, you don't. You did the second Bloody Mary and you chicken out. And that's what we all did when we were kids. But okay.
Oh, yeah.
So this next one, this looks like it might be pretty interesting or terrifying or something. The House That Still Haunts Me is the title of this next bullet point.
Yes. So I used to, and still do sometimes, pet sit for folks, just because I'm a realtor and I can still work and kind of do that at the same time. I especially did it when I was younger, because you're younger, trying to pay off your college loans or whatever. And it was kind of, a good opportunity for me to make some extra money. And so this lady who was my insurance agent at the time found out that I pet sit, and she was like, I've got these 2 cats. They're wonderful. She come pet sit for me. And I was like, okay, that sounds great, until it wasn't. And so I got to her house, and this has been a long time ago. So I didn't immediately feel like there was something, like I couldn't put my finger on it. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't see anything, or you have the image of anything. I felt like something was there, but I just never saw anything. So I just thought, okay, maybe it's just me, whatever. I should know better than that by now. But anyway, I noticed that the cats that she had were always seemed terrified of things that I couldn't see. And that's your first sign, obviously. I'm sure you've heard of people's pets being able to see something that you can't see. So that was my first indication, okay, they're seeing something that I can't see there. I wonder what it is. And, again, it was when I was much younger and I wasn't as skillful as I am now, so I couldn't tell what it is, which is too bad, because I really, out of all the experiences I've had, this one was pretty terrifying, to be honest with you. But as I stayed there, I began to hear this music box. And I thought, well, that's weird. I wonder where that's coming from. And it sounded like it was coming from the stairs, because it's a 3-story house. And the main level of the house was the middle floor. So from downstairs is where the music box sounded like it was coming from. And I'd be like, man, that's weird. And then it began to bother me because it would just go off constantly. And I'm like, man, I've got to find that music box and get it to stop. So I go downstairs and I realize that it's a sewing room and there's no music box. And I searched for it and never found it. Well, then I was talking to a friend of mine who actually had given her some information about her grandmother that had passed. So she knew that like I was sensitive and those kinds of things. And she wanted to come stay with me. And I said, well, you can come stay with me here at the house, but I'm pet sitting and there's something going on in the house. I'm not really sure what it is right now, because I don't have any images of what it is. And I said, but I keep like hearing a music box. And sure enough, like she came and she spent the night. And the next day, because I kept thinking, she's going to hear it. She's going to hear it. It's going to happen. And it never did. And I thought, wow, okay, well, maybe I need to get her to stay more often. But then that next day we were having lunch and it went off, like the music box started playing. And she didn't say anything like out loud. She just was like pointing, like it's downstairs. And I'm like, I know, but like, I can't find anything. So her and I went downstairs to try to find it. Cause it really was like that. Like if you wound up like a music box, it wasn't just one little tinkle, you know what I mean? Like it was like the song. So it wouldn't stop it. So it was really annoying. And we couldn't find anything. We never could find anything that it was coming from, which was so strange. But I noticed the next few times I stayed there, not only did the music box happen, but then the televisions began to cut on and off by themselves. So I would be like asleep. It would be 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and the television upstairs where the main bedroom was would cut on. I'd be like, man, what in the world, And I'd cut it off and it cut back on like an hour later. And then what would happen a few more times after I stayed there was the one downstairs would cut on. So the one upstairs would cut on, I would turn it off, and then the one downstairs would cut on. So I'd have to go down there and turn it off. This is back before like DVRs or anything where you could like set a timer and your television would cut on. It just was back before any of that. So, and she didn't have anything like that either. Because I kept looking like, are there like shows that like the television just automatically come on again? You're trying to explain it away and figure out what's going on. But by then, of course, I knew there's something in the house, and okay, well, we've got some stuff going on. We've got like an entity of some sort that's trying to get my attention. Obviously, it's got my attention. And then when I began to pay more attention to it because I stayed there for like a year going through that with the music box and the televisions going on and off, back and forth. Well, it was almost like you need to notice me, you need to recognize me or something like that. And I was finally like, okay, like I know there's something in the house, I know you're there. Well, then it started the television thing one night while I was staying there again, and I unplugged the televisions, but they still kept coming on and off, which is, you'd think impossible, right? But it wasn't. And I couldn't believe it. I was really frightened by then because anything that can do that is powerful, When that happened, I was pretty scared, and I know better than to allow your fear to take over, because I know that there's some entities that will feed off of that energy. And it's true. There are some that will do that. So I was trying not to be afraid, but I had just never had anything like be able to turn something on that wasn't even plugged in. I mean, that was something I'd never seen before. And then also the climax of that was I was staying there when that was happening, and my phone rang. And when your phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning, you think the worst of the worst. You're just like, oh God, somebody's in the hospital or whatever. Well, I run downstairs to answer it. And again, this is before like cell phones or anything like that we have now. It was just like one of them little Nokia tiny phones that you couldn't even text on, but it rang and I ran downstairs to get it. And when I answered it, I cannot explain to you the sound that came through my phone, but I can tell you, I've never been more terrified in my life as to what ever made that sound.
So it sounded like something that was breathing, whether it was human or not, making it some kind of a horrible sound, something that was alive, making a sound.
It was screaming, but
Oh.
it was screaming in a way that is unhuman. Like I've never heard anything make that noise before, because it was screaming, but it was undecipherable screaming, but not like a human like scream. It was something that I have never heard before and never want to hear again. Needless to say, I mean, I was scared out of my mind by then, because I was just like, this is something that's powerful, and I don't know what to do. Like, I got to get out of this house, and I mean, it scared me so badly, the sound did, that and this is, how you have that fight or flight response. If you've ever had that, it just happens in a flash. Well, I was like, fight, so I run over to like the knife thing that's in the corner of the kitchen, and I grab a huge knife as if I'm going to be able to take it on with a knife, but that is the first thing I did. And then I look down to where my car is parked, and there's like a little street lamp that she had put up there at the house where you park. And I'm looking down in my car like, is something in my car? Because if not, I'm running outside with this knife in my hand, and I'm getting in my car and I'm getting the hell out of here, I mean, I was so terrified, Shannon. I just had never had anything that powerful come at me like that before. And again, I was much younger. I didn't have the abilities that I do now. And it knew that, I felt like it knew that.
So does that mean then that the insurance agent who owned the house wasn't having any of these experiences?
So here's the interesting part to that story. That same week that it ramped up, all of the unplugged televisions or cutting on and off, but before my phone rang, because that was it for me. But with the televisions cutting on and off and stuff, I'm like, okay, this is getting out of hand. I get a phone call one night on the house phone, because this is back when people had those. And it's a friend of hers. And she's like, hey, I need to know where Melanie is. And I said, I don't know. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, I don't know where she is. She never tells me where she's going on vacation. And that was really a thing of hers. She would never tell me where she was. She would only give me like her cell phone number that she had at the time, or if it had changed, and then tell me to contact her, like call her, but she would never tell me where she was going. And her friend was like that night. And this, again, I should say, this is when all the activity had really ramped up. And I get this phone call from her friend, because this is the last week I ever stayed there. And she says, well, I need to know where Melanie is, because I just got a phone call from Melanie and it was very frightening. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, well, I think she's going to do something to herself. And I was like, what? I was horrified. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I really don't know. Because I think she thought that I just wasn't telling her like where Melanie was. And I was like, no, really, I really don't know. But oh my God, and I started like kind of looking through mail and stuff like that was on the counter just to see if I could like figure out like where her destination was. And I never could find anything, but her friend was significantly frightened. I mean, like she was like afraid that something was going to happen to her. And again, that's that last week that I stayed there. And that's when all that activity was occurring. Like, it was like just ramped up. Like, I mean, like before that, it was just the occasional television cutting on and off and the music box. And I'm like, okay, I can live with that. But then when you unplug something from the wall and like it's coming on, you're like, okay, this is powerful. And then it was after that, after she called me the next night, that thing came through my phone. And again, it's a blood-curdling scream, but not a human scream. It was something else. Because if it was a human scream, it would be something like, okay, I've seen that on a scary movie, or it'd be something that you'd be familiar with and you'd heard before. This was not that.
A lot of nope in that one too, and a lot of similarities to the manifestations of when you had that ex of yours that was going through some depressing times.
Yes.
And then you were unfortunately the one taking some of the brunt of that in a way, in a different form. So
yes.
So the music box, was that the same song every time you would hear that?
Yes.
Was it a recognizable song? Do you know
No.
what? Okay.
It was not. It wasn't like the typical, like, it wasn't like Mary Had a Little Lamb or something,
Right.
like that we would be able to identify. It was nothing like that at all. And because it wasn't like just one little like ding, 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 like it wasn't just one little thing. It was a long like thing where somebody had wound it up and just let it play. And you're just like, what the? But you never, once you went downstairs, you could never find it.
So
like
creepy.
It would stop. It would stop. And you're like, I know it was coming from downstairs, but where? I mean, even my friend was like pointing downstairs because I'm like, you could, when you can tell like what direction something's coming from usually. And this was definitely coming from downstairs and there was nothing there. Nothing I could find anyway. But even if I could find it, like, what has wound this thing up? Because it's not just playing a little bit of the melody like some music boxes would do. Because I had music boxes that would do that. Like, we bumped it, it would go ding, 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 or whatever. This wasn't that. This was like wind it all the way up and let it play until you start down the stairs, and then it would stop.
So when she got home to take back over the house and, get back to work, whatever, I mean, obviously at this point, after hearing what the friend had said for this trip, it's not like you could be like, hey, Melanie, where'd you go? And what'd you do? It was probably even more strange to try to even bring that up. I don't know how close you were with her, but was there ever any discussion of the activity in her house with her?
There was never any discussion with her about the activity in her house. As a matter of fact, when that thing came through my phone, and I say thing because I really don't know what it was, I grabbed that knife out of the butcher block thing that it was in, ran down to my car, got in my car, and called my husband sobbing because I was so frightened and so scared that I had about 2 or 3 nights left to watch these cats. And I actually drove an hour, because my house was an hour from her house. I drove an hour 2 times a day back and forth to that house for the rest of her vacation, because I couldn't stay there again. I was like, I can't stay there again at night. And I never said anything to her about it, ever. And I don't know why I didn't. I don't know if it was because, she was very reclusive and very obviously. She was very reclusive. She wouldn't tell you like where she was going on vacation or anything like that. But I don't know. I just never ever confronted her like, there's something in your house. Cause I thought, surely to goodness, she's got to know something's in her house. Cause I mean, if it's doing the same activity with her there, I mean, why hasn't she called someone, like I am older. Call me when I get older. I'll come take care of it for you. But I was so young then, and so like, I mean, like even I don't know. I wish now I would have said something to her, like, hey, this is, you need to get somebody in your house.
Oh my God, that would be me. When I'm trying to put myself in your shoes for this kind of a thing, or Melanie's, if, as you say, if, was she experiencing that? The second a music box goes off anywhere in my house, or if TVs are, turning on when I unplug them, I'm like, let's circle the wagons. I got to find people that are badasses and find some help for this because, I'm just wondering, obviously she had some depression going on, but is it the chicken or the egg? Was she manifesting these things because of her depression, or was she depressed because she was oppressed, because something was attached to her and because she was having all that crazy shite going down in her house?
I know. I've asked myself the same thing. Like, is this something that because, I really did feel like the shadow person with my ex was like totally manifested from that depression. And I can't say that for sure, Shannon. I mean, none of us know what any of this is, but I really did feel like that's what it was from. It just had this malevolent feel to it. Like, whether it was manifested from her or not, I don't know, but it really just felt like, I'm going to get you, like, like I'm going to start here. And then if this don't do it, then I'm going to do this. And then it was like the whole poltergeist thing, where you start off with something little and you just kind of go, oh, okay, well, and you just blow it off and ignore it. Like you never should, just saying, people.
Mm-hmm.
But it just built in the power that it had. And again, it could have been building from my fear, from her energy, because these things are energy. We can at least, I feel like I can at least say that they are some kind of energy. But like, is it feeding off of like what it's doing to people? And that's where it's getting its energy from to do these things. It's just, it's weird. You just wonder what that connection is, because I really don't know, what the connection is, but I do think there is one.
Was there an invite for you to come back again to watch the cats that you had to decline?
I actually remember writing a note when I was at home, a note, like a handwritten note, and left it on the countertop of her house and left it. And of course, put the knife back in the butcher block. I mean, and finished the care for her cats and stuff. But I mean, Shannon, this experience was one of those things where it was just off the charts. Like, I've just never had something that powerful just come at me like that, and direct it, to me, that it would come through my phone, which is a very personal object,
Yeah.
Those other things weren't mine, but the phone was mine. And the weird thing is even though it was an really old Nokia phone, it would still tell who was calling. Well, it's ringing, and it rang like 3 times before I could run down the stairs to answer it. There's nothing on the screen.
Oh, wow.
Nothing. So it's not like unknown caller or, whatever. Nothing.
I guess hell doesn't have a listing in the phone book, right? When the demons are calling.
I reckon not.
Good Lord, that gave me chills when you said that. There's just nothing on the screen.
There's
really
nothing on the screen.
That's where my brain goes to. I'm like, what does it look like? This thing that's making this noise. Not that you really want to think about it because you already had to listen to it. I mean, the cats are probably like, Stephanie, take us with you. Like, we're so over this.
And I felt so bad for him because I really did, because that was the beginning of the experience, was where I noticed that, like, they're seeing things I can't see. And I couldn't see it, and I never got an image of it. And still to this day, I mean, like, there's just no image, which for me, even back then, was strange. Like, there was no imagery with it at all. It was just like, I'm coming for you, and you know, you might can blow this off and this and this and this, but every time you come back, I'm gonna come at you stronger until you get out of this house. Because it was like the scream was almost like, get out of the house, like, get out, but it was, again, you couldn't tell any words because it was so loud and so just, I mean, I can't even explain it because no human has ever made this sound before, but it was definitely a scream, like, get out, and I sure did. I listened.
So you have tried to tap back into that incident and see what was making that sound, or why it was, picking on you so
Yes.
much, and you can't,
No,
it won't give you any information.
nothing. And I've tried to go back and think about it, and, think about all the details, and, what could have been, because, I watch, like, paranormal caught on camera, and I watch all this stuff, because, I mean, when you're part of some of that paranormal world, you want to feel like you're included. You know what I mean? Like, you want to feel like there's more people out there like me, So I watch a lot of that kind of stuff, and I've never heard anything like this before, or this happening to someone before. I mean, it's bizarre. I mean, it's frightening, really. I mean, that something has that much energy and can do those things. But I'm a believer now, because I had never seen, even though after my mom brought home what she did from the thrift store, because that happened before this, I just had never seen something with that much power.
Well, and also, I like that you picked up on the fact that it didn't call the house phone; it called your phone, just to make it
It
that
called
much more
mine.
personal.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I mean, imagine just, like, laying in bed, and then this TV just comes on and it's static, and you're like, well, what in the hell? And then you cut it off, you go back to sleep. And then that one comes on and you cut it off, and then the one downstairs goes on. Like, it's like playing with you. It's like, well, I'll play this music from this music box that you're never going to be able to find. Like, it was just like, it's like almost tormenting, in a way. Because, I mean, I get really annoyed with sounds and things like that. Like, if something's, like, really repetitive and over again, and it's almost like it keyed into that or something, and started with the music box, and then the televisions, and then, I don't know, it's crazy.
When the TVs would come on, was always on static, never on a TV show or a movie?
It was always on static,
Oh, ugh.
which makes no sense because, even back then, I remember her having, like, cable. So if it was like a time show, or if I mean, again, you're trying to explain it all away as it's happening, and even for someone who's sensitive, you still try to explain it away when you're that frightened. You just, because you got to stay there. You're committed. You're trying to do your job. But yeah, it was always static, always static.
Mm. Damn, that was some creepy stuff right there.
Yeah, and that's why it's the house that still haunts me, because it's one of those things I just have no answers for. Because, again, I watch things and I'll see where somebody's got a poltergeist, or that's what they call it, and things are happening, things are moving, things are doing things, and I'm like, I wonder if that's what it was. But I just don't know.
When the music box would start playing, would it always play start to finish each time? And then, like, even if you went in, eventually you found out it was coming from this sewing room where you still couldn't find an actual music box. you could be standing in that room, and if you had caught it in the middle of the song, would it finish the whole song each time?
No. As soon as you would go heading downstairs, it would stop.
Oh,
So you would hear it because the bar and the kitchen was really close to the staircase that went downstairs. So, when my friend and I were having lunch and she heard it, it's because we were sitting right there. Not that you couldn't hear it in the entire house really, because it was a small house. And even though it had 3 levels, like the upper level was like completely open. It was like an A-frame house. So, I mean, you could hear anything in that house from one room to the other. And you could tell where it was coming from. Even she was like, it's coming from downstairs. And she didn't say anything. She just pointed, because I think it kind of scared her, because I had told her something was going on in the house. And then I'm like, well, let's go try it. She was too. Let's find it, So we go back downstairs, and as soon as we hit those stairs, it stopped. Like immediately. But if you didn't go downstairs, if you didn't start looking for it or do anything, it would keep playing.
wow.
Like it would finish, somebody had wound it up and it would play all the way through.
If you ignored it.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. That's just that trickster element to the whole thing, as you say, just trying to poke at you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just messing with me. I'm convinced it was, because again, sound is one of those things that I'm real sensitive to. Like I can hear sounds that some people can't hear, like a really, really low frequency or something like that. I can pick up on it, because I can tell my husband, like, oh yeah, the train's coming through or something. And he'll be like, what? And I'm like, yeah, the train from miles away, it's coming through.
Wow.
And sure enough, well, like if we're outside and I'm like, yeah, train's coming through, you can't hear it, but then if it whistles, he could hear it. You know what I mean? And he's like, well, how can how do you know that? So I can pick up on sound. So it was almost like it knew that like that would bother me specifically. And then the television cutting on, and when it would cut on, Shannon, it would cut on in the highest volume. That's what was so annoying about it. Because it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to cut on and, be this low static noise. Because maybe I could have slept through that, I don't know, with the light coming on, but it was loud. Like the volume was loud. And I just remembered that. And it's just speaking about this, because, I don't really talk about this experience that much, but I remember the volume was really loud on those TVs. And it was, you sat right up in bed as soon as it went on, and then just as soon as you were like, okay, I'm going to go back to sleep, then it would cut on, and then you cut it off, and then the one downstairs would cut on. So then I'd run downstairs and cut that one off. It was just back and forth constantly until I unplugged them and thought, okay, well, that'll show you. Well, it showed me.
I bet you do identify with the movie Poltergeist, when Craig T. Nelson at the very end of the movie takes that damn TV and from the hotel room, and he just puts the whole damn thing out onto the balcony of the hotel. He's like, nope, not doing any of this.
Absolutely. It's just like, yeah, no, and of course now, like if I'd have had that experience now, I'd been like, yeah, you're gonna get the hell out of here, and taking care of it. But, I just had never seen anything at that point in time in my life that was just powerful like that could turn something on that wasn't even plugged into the wall. A light flashing is one thing, or, something being moved is another thing, but that specifically is powerful.
The escalation of this was over how many stays at her house?
It was, actually, I stayed at her house for years, like 2 or 3 years. I stayed at this woman's house.
And she would go like for a week or two a year, or like, or several times a year?
Several times a year, like
Wow.
2 times a year she would go. So within a few years, every time I went, it would get more and more and more. That's a good point. I should have said that in the beginning. Sorry, but
no, that's okay.
Yeah. I stayed there for, I'd say 3 years maybe. I pet sit for her, and it was twice a year. And then so in the very beginning, it started like the first time I stayed at the house was a music box, and the cats being frightened and could see stuff, and they always were like that. And the music box was always there. But then, like, I remember like the second or third time I stayed there, the television started cutting on and off, and I ignored that several times without ever unplugging the television. That was the last week I stayed there.
Isn't that interesting, though, that even from the very beginning, you said, I've always had poor eyesight, but then you just said that your sense of, your auditory senses are extremely heightened, where you will hear things that other people can't hear, and that if you want to bother Stephanie, you do something over and over in the auditory sense, and it's going to bother me. It's like it knew that somehow, because look at the pattern of what it was doing to you specifically.
Oh, exactly. I agree with you 100%. Like, it knew what it was doing. It knew me almost, in a way. And I'm like, but the thing is I know that it was attached to that house, or maybe that person, or both, because like if I would leave, I mean, it didn't follow me, thank goodness, but it didn't follow me. Like, it didn't come with me. My phone never went off, and I never heard that screeching, screaming noise ever again. Only that one time. And that was enough, trust, because even when I talk about it now, I mean, the cold chills, I mean, just the fact that it's so unhuman-like.
It really makes you wonder, though, what, if anything, of course, because, I mean, it would be just as strange, maybe even stranger, if Melanie had zero experiences in that house. But it does make me wonder, with what you went through just coming in as a visitor to pet sit, what was she going through in that house?
I don't know, Shannon, but after I sent the timeline to you, I actually started really thinking about her, because we weren't like friends or anything like that. I just knew her through, being my agent at the time. So we were acquaintances, but I didn't know her really well. I actually looked, and she actually still owns that home and is alive. I mean, she's alive and well, and I don't know if she lives in the home, but she still owns it, because, as a realtor, I get on the computer constantly and look stuff up, and everything. And I looked it up because I was like, I hope she's still alive. I hope she's okay, because you do get concerned for folks, that have maybe possible. I mean, I'm assuming she had experiences in that house. I can't see how she couldn't have had experiences in that house, because that's just, and it may be that my experiences were more intense because I'm very sensitive to those things, and it knew that. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, as far as I know, she's still alive and still has that house.
Yeah, it does make you wonder if she's renting it out, though, right? And then you're going, oh, those poor renters.
Lord, I would have sold that house a long time ago. I would have gotten rid of that, I mean, again, now I could have gotten rid of whatever was in the house, but back then, I mean, I really hadn't honed in on everything that I could do, or I just really didn't know enough about it back then. I knew I was very sensitive to it, and the imagery and all that kind of stuff, I was obviously well aware of. And I mean, because it was almost like, like my friends all knew it, and they would ask me, who's attached to me, you know what I mean? Like, like I could do that, but like back then I couldn't remove anything that strong from a house, but I can now, but not back then.
I mean, that's when things tend to stick with people more, is when you have this, there's different levels of trauma, but that was a trauma to you to run from the house, knife in hand, getting in the car, and then having to physically leave and not ever spending the night there again, ever. I'd be of half a mind to take the damn Nokia phone. And of course, that was kind of when everyone was getting phones, and we've all had that I can see that thing right now, that little brick.
It is. Yeah.
And you're doing the 1 2 1 2 3 to text, but I'd have been half minded to just take that thing and drop it in a lake somewhere. But I think that it's such a good thing that obviously maybe this entity, whatever it is or was, had such an attachment to the house or Melanie or both that it didn't follow you.
Yeah, I'm so glad it didn't, because I mean, I would have definitely had to have done something about it, like had to call some folks or something, to come help me, because I just didn't have the power within me to get rid of something that strong at the time, and I mean, I didn't know what to do either, because I just had never had anything that strong come at me, and it really did. It came for me, like, and I knew, I'm like, this thing's out to get me. Like, like it knows I'm sensitive to it. It's like I could just feel like it knew that I was sensitive, and it was just going to mess with me. And it did. I'm telling you what, I've never had and hope to never have that experience again.
Be like, Mom, you think your dragon puppet entity was bad. Guess what?
No. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's nothing compared to that, really. I mean, it may seem that way. It may seem like one's more than the other, but that one was really, I felt like it was an attack on me.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like it knew you. It had your ticket, as they say, and it was gonna poke and prod you the whole time. And you're like, no problem, I'm out of here. You got your wish, buddy. So, all right, next up is the man who visited during a phone call.
Yes. So this actually happened fairly recently. I was talking with my husband about someone from the past that has since passed, that we suspect has done some pretty bad things. And I actually have never known this person, but my husband knows this person. And I've heard talk of this person, because it's on my husband's side of the family, not mine. And I've never gotten a good feeling about him. But as we were talking about what we think he had done, he came through so strongly that I could actually smell like the stale cigarette smoke and the intense smell of like really, really like old sweat, like when have you ever been close to somebody that just really stunk, like sour sweat smell? I mean, that's what it smelled like. That and just stale cigarette smoke. It was so thick that I was like, he's here, And I asked my husband, I was like, well, was he a smoker? Because I think he's here. And my husband was like, yeah, he is a smoker. And I was like, okay, well, he's pushed his way through. He's here. And he was just that powerful of an entity that he could push his way through today with me. And it let me know that everything we had suspected that he had done bad probably happened, I would say, just from what I could see in the images that I got. And I won't go into those images, only because they involve another family member, and it's not a good story, but I could see what he had done. And he made it very clear that he had done it to that person who's actually still a part of our family and still alive. But yeah, he wanted me to know that he was there, and he did it.
Have you ever gotten visions of, and I hate to be super cliche about this, but it's just the easiest way to put it. Do bad people, after they die, go to a bad place where they hopefully get pineapples shoved up their rear, like in Little Nicky?
I haven't. I can tell you this, though. I can tell when something comes to me if someone is still in that same place. And what I mean by that is, like, if someone had a good life, or if someone was peaceful when they left this place, they still feel that way to me, But when someone's been tormented, or if someone's done really bad things, it comes right off on them to me. Like, I know immediately. but I don't know about what happens to these people. It's almost as if what they've done here is what they are now, or in that realm, if that makes sense, just like if you pass peacefully with your family here, then you're still a peaceful presence to me. But if you didn't, then you're still tormented in some way or another, and it comes off as that. I can feel that immediately when that's happened.
I'm sure for the most part, your husband is quite used to the gifts that you have and the abilities that you have. Do you recall the last time, and it's okay if either you don't or you don't want to share it, but do you recall the last time that he was actually surprised by something that you said or did?
Not anymore. No, as he's gotten to know my family over the years, I mean, my grandmother wasn't around. She had passed after we had met, or she had passed before we met. Yeah, no, he knows good and well. Like I'll even say, for instance, I will tell you this. I kept telling him, I was like, my mom keeps calling. She knows something's going on, because I didn't tell her I was going to be on your show. But as we said earlier, she knows, she knows everything. She's all seeing for sure. But she has called me a lot more this past week, and actually about 30 minutes before we started the show. I didn't answer because I knew we'd be on the phone and I would have to tell her, because I would get that feeling like I know she knows, but we'll have that discussion, I'm sure.
Uh-oh.
So my husband's used to like that, because I'll say, oh, I've been thinking about mom all day. She's going to call, and she'll call.
She called 30 minutes before we started. So she may not be very happy that you came on.
I don't know. I was afraid to say anything to her about it, because some of the stories involved her, and even though her and I are in a good place and we can talk about it, and we joke, and even believe it or not, we even joke about some stuff, because some of it's just it's just too hard to believe,
Right.
It's either laugh or cry about it, you know what I mean?
Right.
So we'll joke about some stuff every once in a while, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if it would bother her or not. So I probably won't tell her, but again, I mean, we probably talk maybe once a week, maybe. And she has called me like this whole week, and then 30 minutes before.
Wow.
So I know she knows.
You guys are really like tuned in. It's very cool. I mean, it is. It's just such a cool gift, and I know it's not. You don't always feel like that. Like when you feel like you have a target on your back and you're just trying to cat sit, at a cool house, and then you're getting harassed. That's not so cool. But yeah, hopefully, if she does learn about the show, she doesn't, and feel too bad about it. I mean, these are incredible stories, and I just feel like I'm lucky enough to have folks come on and share this stuff, because I do think it's just so important to do so, because I know that we all know there's still a stigma attached to most of these things, and it can be tough to talk about. Who I just found out has a podcast that talks about similar things is Paul Giamatti. It's called the Chinwag Podcast, and I'm like, oh my God, Paul Giamatti's talking about this stuff. Yeah, he was on with Howard Stern, and Howard's he's in the camp of we're all freaks and full of crap, and that's okay. I still listen and love him, but Paul was on there talking about his podcast, and then he talks about ghosts, and I saw that the gal from Orange is the New Black was on there talking about Bigfoot, and I'm like, I'm about to check that out. That's so cool. So it's nice that somebody that's more in the quote unquote mainstream and that people know of is going, hey, this stuff's out there. Like I think he's had his own ghost experiences, so that's neat. Sorry for the digression there, but
I'm glad you did digress, because I wanted to say, and I was like, I got to make a point to say this on the podcast. Like, do you remember like how everyone was a quack if they believed in UFOs, which I do believe in, by the way, and then all of a sudden it's on the front page of the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, wait a minute. Like, now it's just everybody, it's just common knowledge, we're just going to put it on the front of this paper. I told my husband, I said, the more people that come out and they talk about these things and they discuss these things, the more it's not going to seem so abnormal, because this is something that I know other people have experienced and have these gifts, so to speak. I know there's more people out there. I've heard more people out there that have it, but I believe that it will become more mainstream the more we talk about it. And that's why I wanted to do the podcast, because I'm like, we need to have a voice, and the more of us that do, the more mainstream it'll be. Who knows? We may end up on the front of the New York Times one day, you know what I mean? I just use that as an example, but yeah.
No, it's a great example. And the strangest thing for me about and I don't, honestly, the UFO subject is one that I keep up with the least, just because of the fact that I guess I just feel like, of course it's of interest to me, but to me, I'm going, of course there's other things out there. Like, it just doesn't, I don't know. It's just down on my list, I guess. But the craziest thing about what you mentioned of it being on mainstream news is the fact that, and you kind of alluded to this, was the fact that it does seem like it's just always been common knowledge. Like, no one's freaking out about it, that they're even talking about this in Congress, or that there's hearings, or that it's on Fox News, or whatever might be going on. Again, I don't keep up with every pulse of the UFO news, but that's the weirdest thing about it for me, is that, and I don't know if that is a dampening of the senses because of movies and video games, and people are just like, or maybe they're all like me. They're like, well, yeah, of course we're not the smartest thing in the universe, and we're not that smart, by the way. Of course there's other things out there, and they can get here, and it's not the way that we think, because we're not that smart. We can't think outside of the box that well, and that's why it's so awesome that we do have places that we can all discuss together and fly our freak flags together, and we're, be nerds together, right? Like, thank God that we have the technology that we do today, and we're not still typing, three on the 3 to get to the, what would it be, F or whatever on the Nokia phone, and to text back and forth these stories,
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I want other folks out there to know that you're not alone, and you're not crazy. There are some of us that are just more sensitive than others, that were affected differently than other folks, and that's okay. I mean, and if you've had eyewitnesses of a Sasquatch, or certainly give Shannon a call for sure. But it's okay, because I believe everyone's story until for some reason I'm told not to, you know what I mean? Because I'm a believer of all things. Why wouldn't I be, knowing what I know now and experiencing what I've experienced in my life? I believe it all.
The screamers and the music box players can buzz off, though.
Yeah.
They can stay away. You've had enough of that.
I have had enough of that. Yeah. Yeah, I don't ever want to experience that again, and I don't want anyone to ever experience anything like that. But it happens, and it happened to me, and I just I don't know. I'm just glad it isn't every experience I have. Thank goodness.
All right, and last but not least, a bad day to be a realtor is the final bullet point.
Yeah. I became a realtor, actually. It's not what I've always done as a job, but some years back. And so these are recent experiences that I've had, because, like, if you're going to go and be a sensitive, you should definitely become a realtor. That makes so much sense, because then you can just go into all these houses and get all these experiences. But thankfully, not every house has that, but 2 of them have so far. And the first one was, I went to show a house that had been vacant for a while, and I go in to show it, and I lay my coat down on the counter, and I start to turn on the lights in the house, and it's a 2-story house, and open the doors, open the closet doors. And then as I'm coming out of one bedroom to go in the next, I hear something and I go in there and then the closet doors closed. Or the light's off in the room that I just switched the light on in. And I'm like, what's going on? So I'm opening up, I'm trying to like get a feeling. And I could tell that there was a man attached that had lived there previously. And he didn't understand why I was coming through and opening the doors and turning the lights on and stuff like that. Like he didn't understand that, So I tried to be real gentle the rest of the time because it was like it was his home, you know what I mean? And he was still there. And I could just get the sense of feeling that he was just wondering why I was in his house, turning on the lights and opening doors. And that's why he kept going through and shutting off a light or closing a door behind me. And I remember saying something to him like, it's okay, I want to leave your house now after the viewing and everything. And just telling him what a beautiful home he had.
I think that's a really good point. And going forward, I mean, and you said it right out of the gate. You're like, I mean, for me, being a sensitive person, being a realtor can be kind of an interesting occupation. But I think for someone buying a home, that would be a good prerequisite. Like for me, like, oh, you're a realtor. Awesome. What are your credentials? How long you been doing it? Are you psychic or sensitive in any way? No? Okay, can't use you. Because I need to know, if the music boxes might play in the middle of the night and all this stuff. So, that's an interesting point. And then because, well, I don't know if I think it's every state that, if someone was murdered in a home, if there was a murder in a home, that has to be disclosed, right? Like, I think is that every state? Anyway, I know it's some states.
No.
Oh, really?
It isn't. No.
Creepy. But that's also creepy then if, you're going in and do you ever, okay. So, and I don't know what the second story is. If you say it's a bad day, then I would hazard to say it's not going to be a great story. So then do you feel, and this is a generality because I'm sure it will tie into the second story and I'm screwing it up, but do you feel like in this instance with this man that stayed behind, do you feel like, oh, I should just like joke about a ghost in a house? Or, I mean, I know you're trying to sell a house also, but, do you ever feel like guilty because, this house has something there or maybe it depends on who's looking, if there's kids or, maybe it was a nasty man and there's kids that want to move into the house with their parents, that could be a sticky situation for you.
Yeah. And I've thought about that because the bad day to be a realtor story is obviously, like you said, it's not a great story. But I got the point across really fast on that one because it was pretty frightening. But I would give anyone, including you, Shannon, if you ever decided to move here, a wink, wink, and a nudge, nudge. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I probably should go look at another house. Yeah, it's best I could. Do you know what I mean? Because I really wouldn't want that to happen to anyone. I really wouldn't. Because even if it's something that you feel good about, what if they're going to close those doors and somebody's living there? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to frighten some people. For me, it didn't frighten me because I knew it was all coming from a good place in that experience. But yeah, no, I would be like, somehow or another, I know me, and I would at least try my best to like, we probably should move on to the next listing, or we probably should not look at this house again.
Right, without pissing off the people that you work for, right? And they're like, what, Stephanie, You're blowing these sales. Like, what's going on? Right. You're like, you keep taking me to these serial killer houses. Like, what the hell am I supposed to do?
I know.
All right. So yeah, I apologize. I probably just like blew that. I could have saved that for probably the actual bad house story. So continue. I apologize.
Well, this was just, like I said, it was recent, and I was working with these folks. They're looking for a house. They're looking for kind of a bargain, and all of us are, but they were looking for something that they could fix up. And so, wasn't going to be in the best shape kind of house. And we went to go look at this house, and I pull in, and I'm kind of like, like, I don't know about this one, And I open the door, and as soon as I open the door, I'm like, oh, okay, something has happened here, and I don't know what, but it's not good, because I didn't get an image of what had happened there. But what I did get an image of is that there was nothing in that house on the counters or hanging on the walls or anything like that. So, of course, no one lived there, except there was a portrait of this black and white of this child sitting in a frame on the kitchen counter. That was it. There was nothing anywhere else. Nothing. So it was very strange that it was sitting there. And I thought, well, there's got to be some significance to that. It still didn't feel good, though, whatever it was. And I noticed that, like, somebody had come in to renovate the house, but had left all of their equipment there. Like, let's get out of this house. Because when I asked the listing agent, like, is somebody still working on this house? Oh, no. But I'm thinking, well, they've left all their equipment, and I'm like, I bet you they were afraid of this house, because I'm afraid of this house. I'm sure they were. And so we're walking through the house, and I'm noticing just that one picture that's on the kitchen counter, and the renovate, like a ladder, stuff that you would take with you if you were going to if you were going to leave and not come back, but it's like they left in a hurry. So we're walking around, and I'm looking at all this stuff, and the power isn't on in the house, which also lets you know that, like, there's power tools here and the power isn't even on, so no one's using this stuff. And there's a basement, of course. It's always a basement, right? But I didn't want to go down into the basement because I just had this feeling, but those folks did. And I was like, well, you're welcome to go down in the basement. And he was using, like, the light on his phone as he's walking down the stairs to light up downstairs so you can see what it looks like. And he yells back up to me, and he's like, hey, there's a door down here. Wait a minute, it's locked. It's a small door down here, and it's locked, and it's got, like, scriptures written on the outside of it.
Oh,
and
God.
I was like, oh God. Yeah, exactly. Right. And I was like, yeah. And I'm thinking, oh Lord, what in the, he's like, I think the lock's open though. And I was like, before I could even think about being a realtor, I was like, don't open it. Like, I just screamed, like, just don't open it, and he kind of started chuckling, laughing, and he was like, okay. I was like, well, you're not going to get the house, right? He's like, no. He's like, this needs too much work, whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, then don't open that door, When he came back upstairs, and he was like, why? Are you afraid? And I was like, I am. And I just couldn't hide it. It's like, I'm a salesperson until we find a door that has a lock on it with scripture written on the outside of it. I'm like, nope.
Oh, so much nope. And you just want to yell at him, haven't you seen every horror movie ever?
I know, right?
Come on, man.
Exactly what it was. Because the weird thing is that, like, so I'm leaving the house, and, like, every time I visit a property, if I see, like, a little bird feather or a rock or something like that, that's really cool. Like, and I mean, like, just not someone's personal rock, but, just a rock in the gravel or whatever, I'll pick it up because I'm just like, oh, look at that. Well, I happened to pick up a feather in the driveway as I was leaving, quickly leaving, I should add. And I'm on my way home, and I'm like, you know what? I better get rid of this feather. And so I rolled my window down, and I just tossed the feather out the window because I was like, it's almost like it knows, it's going to come on home with me attached to this feather or something. Seriously, that's what I thought. And then I called my husband, and I'm like, yeah, I threw the feather out the window. I was like, I'm going to pull up in the driveway and I want you to bring some salt out here because I'm going to salt myself off before I walk into our house. That's how scared I was, like, of whatever it was in the house.
So because you said that you got a feeling pretty much when you pulled up into the driveway, right? And then it just obviously things escalated a little bit from there. If you wanted to, not that we both know why you didn't want to, it was a good choice. If you wanted to know more, would you have to walk down the stairs and like put your hands on the door, or could you have just tapped into whatever that was standing right where you were?
You know, I probably could have tapped into what it was. I really, in a situation like that now, just as best I can, keep those doors closed because I don't want to know. You know, there's just times I just don't want to know, you know, and sometimes when you speak of it, like if you speak it out loud, it's almost like it gets a little bit of energy and it'll come through those doors, you know, like the phone call that I had where something came through. It was almost like you're speaking about me, I'm coming through, you know, like, and it doesn't always happen that way, but I mean, it's just a good way to describe it. You know, like if I were to stay in there in the house longer and really think about, you know, okay, and touch like I actually wouldn't even touch the picture of the kid that was on the counter because there was something that was part of that. I don't know what, but I could just tell because it was a husband and wife, and the wife had gone over there and picked up the picture. It's like, oh, they left the picture, you know, and I'm thinking, well, they left a bunch of stuff, you know, like that was almost like it was left by the person that owned the house. And then like the renovated stuff was somebody else, you know, and they just, I guess, gotten scared. I mean, I would imagine because it was a scary place to me. And I don't know exactly what happened in it, but I feel like if I'd have touched the picture and really focused on it and just swung those doors wide open, then I'm sure I could have picked up on what was going on in that house.
Who in the hell in their right mind would be like, where do I sign? Let's get that earnest money in. I am sold.
I'm buying it right away. But yeah, I mean, it was like so instinctive as soon as he was like, now wait a minute, I think this lock is unlocked. I'm not sure. Like, don't open it. No. You know, like, and he's just like, what in the, I mean, because I really did scream out at him, like, don't open it, you know, like, I don't care if the lock's unlatched or whatever, there's a reason for all of that. Somebody had a reason to do that, and I don't want to know what it is.
You know, the lock and the scripture is bad enough, but there's something worse about it being a small door. I don't know why. Just mentally, I'm going, that's way worse than a regular door. I don't know why.
Yes, it is. Because I've gone through a lot of houses, and I have to say, even if the house isn't creepy and there's nothing in the house, if I see a small door, I'm like, you know, like, oh, know about that small door.
Yeah.
You know,
what the hell?
What's behind that? You know, like, yeah.
No, yeah, it just screams demonic portal from hell or something. I don't know.
It's like Amityville Horror all over again. Like, it's like, what is this? You know, like, but yeah, I was like, I wasn't even down there and didn't even see the door. Just the description was like enough for me where I was like, oh gosh, no. And already the feeling that I had, that oppressive feeling, I was like, nope. I'm like you, big nope.
I love immediately the dude is like, hey, Stephanie, something kind of weird down here. He immediately is like, what in the actual hell is this? It does make me wonder, though, what scriptures were written, you know, like some kind of I wonder if he meant like scripture from the Bible or just like kind of a bind. Oh, okay. Ugh.
Yeah, that's what he said. It was like scriptures from the Bible were written.
Oh, man.
Here's the bad part of that, and I should have given this descriptive. It was in crayon.
Oh, come on.
And it was like, because he said that every scripture was written with a different crayon, and I was like, oh my God. Like in the absolute, you know what is going on here?
Yeah.
Like, first there's this picture, and then there's all this stuff that like someone's left, because I'm sure maybe they had experiences or something like that. And I'm sure they did, because I mean, I felt it as soon as I walked into the house. I'm sure they were creeped out too. Can you imagine like working on a house that has a tiny door with a lock and scripture written crayon on it? I mean, it's in crayon, like different. He said it was different colors of crayon. I was like, oh my God, that's worse. Like,
well, yeah, and whoever owned all that equipment, that'll cost money, especially if it's from an outside company or contractor. They would never leave that stuff behind in their right mind.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could tell. I mean, because I've seen houses that were being renovated, and some of the stuff's still there because they're still working on it or whatever. This hadn't been touched, and the power wasn't even on in the house. I mean, it was left like mid renovation. And I was like, well, wonder what they experienced. I mean, really, I'm sure getting it, because, you always hear like, you start ripping out stuff in a house. Sometimes that'll stir some stuff up, and that's true. Sometimes it will. So, who can you imagine what they experienced? They were like, hey, we'll just cut that as a loss and we'll get the hell out of here. I mean,
no kidding.
I would have.
The second you have to start trying to bind something with scripture written in crayon, time to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like you. It's like every horror story ever, like it just unfolded right there in that house. And I just couldn't believe it. And I was so creeped out about it that like I couldn't even keep the bird feather that was in the yard, because I was like, nope, I don't even want to take the chance that anything from that place is coming back with me. And so I just threw it out the window and I was like, Sean, bring some salt outside. I wouldn't even come in the house until I threw some salt on me, because I thought this will help.
Yeah, even the dude looking at the house is like, I can see why this is a really good deal now. All right, let's go to the next one though. Not needing it that bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been in a lot of homes, and that one was like you said, it was just every horror story right there. And I was like, no. But I also had the feeling too, and I knew that something had happened. And like you said, if I'd have stayed longer, if I'd have really wanted to know, but I just really didn't, Shannon.
Yeah, because it's not like most of you guys have the luxury of wiping your own memories and putting in screen memories. So why even go there, right? If you don't have to. Yeah,
and I really don't do that a whole lot anymore. I try not to, because you want to live life without some of those bad things happening to you, or having to experience that stuff, if you don't have to. If you're doing it for someone or something like that, that's one thing. But then if you're just opening yourself up to just every experience, I mean, I'll watch like the ghost, the folks that do the paranormal stuff, and they walk around the house and like, hey, throw something at me and open the door. And I'm like, no, don't ask it to do anything, because it's going to do something if it wants to do something. And then you're probably not going to like it if it does. Chances are, that's, you're not going to like it, and so I would never ask anything to come at me, or, that's a big nope for me, because I don't have to ask things to come at me. Things just do.
Yeah, I was going to say, you definitely don't need to do that.
So I'm like, yeah, don't do that. But I always just cringe when people say that, because I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I know that's their job and that's what they do, and that's it, but I can't imagine walking in someplace and just be like, come on, bring it on, because I mean, without even asking, when you're sensitive to that kind of stuff, it just happens to you and there's nothing you can do about it. But as long as keeping the doors shut on some of that as much as you can will keep you from experiencing absolutely everything that's probably happened in the house, or, in a situation.
Yeah, that, and grab the salt and grab the sage stat.
I know. I have salt and sage everywhere. Like, I'm just like, okay, like I am ready for the paranormal apocalypse, like bring it on, I'm ready,
All I know is if we have a paranormal apocalypse, I'm coming to your house, Stephanie. That's
Come
it.
Come on, Shannon. That's fine.
I am in the car already. Don't even worry about it. Well, Stephanie, I cannot thank you enough for all the time today. It was an incredible chat, and I do hope that we talk again soon.
I hope so. I really appreciate you having me on and providing the platform for everyone that you